It's great to have you with us from wherever you're tuning in from. For more information about Elevate Church or to contact us, head to our website elevatechurch.me and take us wherever you go by downloading our Elevate Church AU app. We hope this message inspires and helps you to take your next steps in your journey.
Taking a moment together just to remember the cross and remember and reflect on what Jesus did on the cross, and ultimately, hopefully, remember what Jesus made possible by his death on the cross. The cross, I think, is probably the most recognizable symbol going around today. You know, you literally see crosses everywhere. You see them on t-shirts, you see them on jewelry, you see them on tattoos, you see them on hospitals, schools, many church buildings. You know, this idea of the cross. And now in 2025, it's portrayed as a symbol of victory. You know, a symbol of the greatest rescue mission in all of human history. And so we gather, and Christians all around the world will be gathering on a day we call Good Friday to remember a cross. But here's the thing about the cross is, I don't think if you and I had been eyewitnesses to Jesus going through and enduring death on the cross, I don't think we would have described that day as good. Because had we been there, we would have seen Jesus firstly arrested and actually endure 6 separate trials. 3 trials with the Jewish religious leaders and then 3 trials with the Roman authorities, resulting in the verdict, crucify him. Had we been eyewitnesses and had we been followers at the time, we would have known that Jesus was actually innocent. So to be condemned to death by capital punishment, the actual most brutal form of capital punishment the Romans could actually come up with, I don't think we would have described that day as a Good Friday. And even before Jesus was actually hung on the cross, he endured brutal punishment at the hands of the Roman soldiers. He was spat on, he was beaten, kicked, called all sorts of unimaginable things. He was whipped 40 times, and by the way, history records that many people didn't even survive that stage of the punishment process. It was just that brutal. And in fact, this punishment prior to the crucifixion, this punishment went on for so long that the Roman soldiers who were inflicting this punishment and humiliation, they actually ran out of steam. They actually said, we're done, long before Jesus was even done. And then they made him, because they didn't have the means, they made him carry the beam of the cross up the hill to ultimately be crucified. And crucifixion itself was literally designed by the Romans as a public demonstration to the people that they had conquered. Listen, get in line and stay in line, or you could be next. It was just this incredibly authoritarian public statement. And it was so brutal that the people at the time, they didn't actually have a word that could encapsulate just how horrific crucifixion was. So they actually created a new word specifically to describe the brutality of crucifixion. We use that word today. The word is excruciating. It was invented as a next level word because the punishment that Jesus went through was next level compared with anything else. And yet, here we are 2,000 years later declaring today is a good day, that today is Good Friday. So I just want to really very quickly fly over some of the reasons why we call today Good Friday. So Jesus, when he was on the cross, he hung on the cross, still alive, albeit gasping for breath, from 9 a.m. through to around 3 p.m., so 6 hours. And history records that in that 6 hour period, Jesus made seven separate statements. And I just want to look at three of them. And I want to start with the first one. The first one, and I just wonder if we had been gathered there and we heard Jesus utter these words, I wonder if it would have been the most surprising thing that we had heard and couldn't have even imagined that this would have been the first. The first thing that Jesus said as he hung on the cross was, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. I mean, I'm just thinking if I was there, I'd be thinking, Father, forgive them. Shouldn't it be, Father, unleash all of the wrath of heaven and rain down punishment to give those people what they deserved? I mean, he was looking out at the people who put him on the cross. And Jesus' message was a prayer to his Father, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Now, I don't have time. We could talk about how Jesus modeled forgiving and how important that is in our own lives. That's a message for another time. I just want to highlight the reality that some of the people that Jesus was asking his Father to forgive were the worst of the worst. That they were complicit in an innocent man being put to death on a cross. Jesus wasn't the only person on a cross that day. He was surrounded by two other people, but they were both guilty. He was not. And yet he cried out to his Father, forgive these people, the ones that did this to me. And I take this as a reminder that you on your worst day, that decision you made, that's the worst decision of your life in your past. That thing that you've wondered, have I gone too far this time? Or even maybe some people get to the place where they wonder if they're too far gone. That Jesus is willing and able to forgive the worst of the worst if we ask him. Then his fourth statement, I kind of think is nearly as bonkers as the first one, because Jesus cried out again to his Father, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me? And don't miss it. In this moment with this statement, this is the moment in history where Jesus fully entered our humanity. This is the moment where Jesus felt alone and abandoned, that God literally was no longer present and active and operating in his life. And it reminds me that we don't serve a distant, indifferent God who just watches from afar, looking to catch us doing the naughty things and maybe congratulate us occasionally doing the right thing. We serve a God who fully entered into our humanity. And actually understands our humanity. And I just think that a God who understands us is a God that we can trust with absolutely everything in our lives. And then there was the sixth of the seven statements that Jesus made, and he declared, it is finished. Which might have been a little bit puzzling, but I think that statement meant something different to the various groups of people who were still present at the foot of the cross. There would have been some Jewish religious leaders. They were the ones that were actually the protagonists for having Jesus arrested and ultimately crucified. And I wonder, because they'd seen him as a threat. They'd seen his growing power and popularity and influence as a threat to their power and their influence. So they put this scheme in motion to have Jesus crucified and ultimately eliminate the threat. And so they see Jesus taking literally his final breaths and declaring it is finished. And I wonder if they were literally saying, yes, thank God, it's finished. crisis averted. No civil war. We're going to remain in power. We're going to remain... That guy, he's about to take his last breath. It is finished. Phew. Then there would have been some of Jesus' disciples, some of his closest followers who went all in. They left careers, they left families, they left hometowns to follow him. And they put all of their hopes and their dreams and their aspirations and their trust in him. He was the Messiah. They saw him as the Messiah. They recognized him as the Messiah. He was the one that God had finally sent to get rid of the Romans and restore the nation of Israel to the glory days of King Solomon and King David. And yet now that Savior is hanging on a cross. Saviors aren't meant to die. Messiahs aren't meant to die. The job that they expected Jesus to do, to become the next king of the Jews on an earthly fashion, it's over. That dream, their hopes, their aspirations, it is finished. They would have felt disappointment. Literally heartbreaking disappointment. But then there might have been some people who actually understood or even maybe just had a glimpse of what Jesus was talking about, because Jesus, the word that he used when he said it is finished, is actually an accounting term. It's a business term. It's a term that was used if you owed somebody money. You'd taken a loan from a wealthy person in your area, and you had a contract in place where you would pay it back in installments. You would turn up at the agreed time with the agreed amount, and you would hand over that installment, and they would write that in their ledger, and then whatever the next month, let's say you brought in your next installment, they would write that in the ledger. And when you came to make the final payment on the debt that you owed, they would literally stamp it, the bill that you had, the debt that you owed, they would literally stamp it with this word, with this phrase: it is finished, paid in full, nothing more owing. You are now free of this debt. And Good Friday is an opportunity for us to remember that we, by our sin, and it's not something that people like to admit, but we've all done dumb things that have caused separation between us and God. We could never have paid that debt. No amount of good works and, giving money to the poor and buying, nothing could bridge that gap, could restore that relationship. It was a debt that we couldn't pay. And we could keep turning up with the bill and try to make the installments and literally could not possibly repay the debt to restore our relationship with God. And yet he sent his son Jesus to pay it on our behalf. And so on this day, Jesus declared to anybody and everybody who puts their faith in him, guess what? That debt that you owed, that you couldn't pay, it is finished, paid in full, nothing more owing. These are the reasons, some of the reasons why today is Good Friday. And a word that we've been talking about in the last 24 hours as team members is the word gratitude. And really praying that we would leave this place and take time throughout today to actually see gratitude actually increase in our lives. The enormity of the gratitude hopefully is a reflection of the greater appreciation of the enormity of the sacrifice that Jesus made for us.
We really hope you got a lot out of this message. If you live in the Perth area, we'd love for you to join one of our live experiences. For times and directions, as well as information, head to our website, elevatechurch.me. For those of you beyond the Perth area, we'd love for you to connect with our online experience, which premieres every Sunday via YouTube and Facebook Live, and on demand immediately after. And to partner with us to reach more people by giving financially, head to our website elevatechurch.me and also download our Elevate Church AU app.